We established the Strange Encounters group, I guess you'd say, content is the word, about 7.5 years ago. And so we've been running a Facebook page about that ever since, and a YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel we've had various incarnations over the years with the Strange Encounters radio show on Bay FM, and plus Barry and I kicked it off with interviewing people about their personal experiences and putting them up on YouTube. And now I'm doing the Zoomcast, I guess you'd call them, with Ben Hurl over here. Ben's left the Victorian UFO action group and he's doing his own thing now, so I just asked him if he'd like to do the Strange Encounters episodes with me too. So I sort of bring it all together. So that's what we're doing. But today, I picked this topic because I always like to bring all my interests together, because like I said before, I do think that there's connections between them. So we're talking about EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, which we'll get into, ET contact and crop circles, particularly Australian crop circles, because people don't often hear about those. I just wanted to kick it off with this quote by Yeats. The world is full of magic things waiting for our senses to grow sharper. And I think that's very on target, really, for what I want to talk about today, because our senses are not that sharp. They're sharp enough for us to take in enough information, enough data for us to protect ourselves and to operate in the world, but sometimes our senses are not as sharp as perhaps we'd like to be able to take in more information, which is of a esoteric, paranormal, or information from unseen realms. And the reason for that is because we have sensory gating, and that means that we have parameters to the information that we can take in. You all know that. We only see between infrared and ultraviolet, but animals see beyond that. We know that we can only hear certain frequencies, but other animals can hear beyond that. And they see things differently to us and hear things differently to us. I'm sure they've got a stronger sense of smell as well, and ours is much narrower for all sorts of reasons. And when I was looking this up, it says here, for normal sensory gating, if a person hears a pair of clicks within 500 milliseconds of one another, the person will gate out the second click because it's perceived as being redundant. Now I know I'm talking about a millisecond, but that's, we can pick up stuff in very short time frames. So our brain is wired to function in a certain way, so we operate in the world in a certain way. One of the common terms I came across with this is the cocktail party effect, and we've all been to cocktail parties, I'm sure, at some stage, or some type of loud party in a big room with lots of people, and it means that we can be in have a lot of information around us, but we can focus on, our brain can select a certain amount of information out of all of that cacophony of glasses clinking and people laughing and who knows what's going on, and lots of conversations. So now that's a good thing, because we need that when we're driving, for example. We're looking at the lane in front of us, peripheral vision's picking up the cars on each side of us. We're paying attention to the traffic lights, the pedestrians, blah blah blah. So and that's really important for us to be able to focus narrowly on something for our own benefit. And animals that communicate acoustically, they have that ability too. And, you know, we've got bats and elephants, we've got the cetacean group over there, birds, frogs, or a rattlesnake with its rattler going on, and snakes hiss at each other, etc. I don't know if that's a form of communication, but I mean, it certainly gets the point across. Insects, and of course primates, where we are down here. So all those animals rely on being able to focus on certain sounds for a particular reason, whether it's for their safety, whether it's to find food, etc., etc. And just a little bit more about the sensory spectrum. We have the normal range of sensory acuity here, but if you're like me or some of you in the room probably who are hypersensitive, so you might find that you can't, you know, you don't enjoy loud sounds, bright lights, strong smells, rough fabrics, that sort of thing. You don't like being handled heavily, that sort of thing. But there are people who are hyposensitive. They're not that sensitive at all, and they might have a higher tolerance to pain, like my mum has that. Okay, and I think, oh, doesn't that hurt, Mum? No, it doesn't bother me. Oh, if that was me, I'd be, you know. So, or you might know someone. You say, "Did you hear that?" And they go, "Hear what?" You know, or did you? How does that taste to you? It tastes normal to me. Well, it tastes a bit funny to me. You know, like that sort of thing. So, I'm just laying the groundwork here about our senses and our ability to see and experience things in our ordinary reality and beyond. So what if that sensory gating that we all have, what if that holds us back from being able to go beyond what we experience? You know, if we want to contact deceased relatives, or we want to go and do the Stephen Greer CE5 protocols to bring in extraterrestrials to make contact with them, or those sorts of things. What if we want to do all those things, but the sensory gating gets in the way? It prevents us from going beyond the parameters of our ordinary reality. Just to give you another demonstration, here's human vision of a bird and eggs, and there's the bird vision of the bird and eggs. So it just gives you an idea of what we're not taking in around us, okay? Now there are ways that we can expand our sensory gating by meditating, doing a sweat lodge, being a Sufi, putting on your dress and swirling around like I used to do as a kid. Hypnosis, doing the sleep tank. Who's ever done that? I've always wanted to do that.
The what, sorry?
Going in a sleep tank.
Is that the flotation?
The flotation tank.
Yeah, yeah.
You like that? Yeah.
I got bored. Fell asleep.
You got bored. Okay.
Sorry, no experience of it.
Drumming.
Or you can do drumming. Okay, so then that entrains your mind into an altered state. All these things can take us into altered states of consciousness, and in those states then we can access other things which you don't ordinarily access. So you can meditate, and I've spoken to, gosh, many people over the years who've said they've had some very strange experiences when they've meditated, and they've had visions of seeing dead relatives, or certain like sages who will appear to them and give them information, and sweat lodges. Goodness me. Has anyone done a sweat lodge, by the way? When Bobby Running Fox was here, he said, "Oh, you have to come to a sweat lodge." I said, "No, I don't like perspiring. I really don't." You know, I get very uncomfortable. But, you know, hypnosis is an altered state of consciousness, going into that, and the float tanks and all those things. So when we go into this altered state of consciousness, we can access information. And I remember the first time that I did a shamanic journey, and the information that I got was like, wow, that just blew me away. And I came out of there thinking, I could just do journeys and write a book. I don't have to think about it. I could just write down what I experience, you know, because that information is readily acceptable. And I started to see our reality, my worldview shifted from this ordinary reality to being aware of all these, when I walked outside, all of these energetic threads, I guess you could say, or connections to all the wildlife, the flora and fauna, and everything that was going on around me. The world suddenly became much, much bigger. Now we can go further and we can do seances, as you know, right, and we have all types of interesting experiences. And I've said it before, but I'll just remind you about the documentary on YouTube called The Afterlife Experiments, where they cover the skull experiments, where they had the sitters in the room every week, 4 sitters in the room, and they had all types of interesting things happen, like, and they had the lockbox with the film in it and that sort of stuff, and images appeared on the film, and signatures and poetry and all sorts of things appeared on there. And that information was coming through because something wanted to make contact, I guess you could say, with this reality for whatever purpose. It wanted to communicate, it wanted to send information. And then of course we have apports. I mean, where do they come from, right? They appear in seances too. And why? Why do they appear? Like, is something sending them through? And these are real things that appear on the table in front of people. And what's the purpose? You know, is it a communication? Like, why would a spoon come through? You know, why not something else? Why? You know, why? You could just spend a lot of time on that. Yeah, so I mean, I can understand lockets and little things like this that hang off chains that could come through that might be a significant for somebody from a significant other intelligence for some reason. I understand that. But a spoon and a knife and a newspaper that came through as well in the skull, a whole newspaper, and it was dated. They did the experiment in the early 80s, I think it was, or late 70s, and they published the book in the 80s, I don't know. But the newspaper was from wartime. We don't understand the purpose of these things, and we don't understand the origin. We just don't get it. Could do table tipping. Barry and I have tried that, haven't we? I'm not so sure we were successful at it, that's for sure. We can use technology to communicate with ghosts, right? All sorts of different things we can use to make communications with the other side. But remembering that the other side wants to communicate, and I'm not saying that the other side is full of dead relatives or well, actually, we just don't know. That's the whole point. Whether it's extraterrestrials, whether there's discarnate entities, wayward souls, earthbound spirits. These are things that we think are happening, but it's difficult to actually confirm it on a large scale. There are individuals who have these experiences, and they say, I was given this information by my deceased aunt. And because we were looking for a will and we found it pinned to the back of she told me it was pinned to the back of a picture on the wall, and that's real. It's confirmed in this reality. But there are a whole lot of other things that happen that we have no clue where they come from. We can douse crop circles, make communications in there with the intelligence that has formed them, for example. Asking questions, yes, no, whatever. These guys are probably trying to define the energy flow of the swirls in the crop, but there are other people who've done all sorts of very interesting experiments with dowsing in crop circles too, trying to communicate with the intelligence. So there are lots of things that we aren't aware of what's out there. They could be angels and aliens and archangels and ascended masters and, like I said, discarnate beings and non-human intelligences and other dimensional beings. We just don't fully understand it. That's not a blanket statement. Like I said before, there are some individuals who can confirm things. Now, the other interesting thing is that these experiences I think mostly are spontaneous. People have experiences out of the blue. I've spoken to so many people and over the years, and they weren't looking for them. It just happened. And some of those experiences have been frightening to people, because possibly those experiences seem to occur outside the range of their sensory acuity. So they seem to come. That's why they seem to come from somewhere else, because one minute they're not there, and the next minute they are, and then the next minute they're gone. So these non-human intelligence, in whatever form it shows up, and I'm talking about non-human as in non-physical human form, just shows up, and we don't know where it came from. Now, of course, we have people who have near-death experiences, who make contact with these intelligences for some purpose, and I believe that some of them are archetypal forms that will actually present themselves in a way that we can accept that whatever it is we're being told. You know, for instance, say Auntie Jane shows up. Is it really Auntie Jane, right? And because the entity or the intelligence can present itself to us as Auntie Jane and tell us information that Auntie Jane might have known, does it really mean that it is Auntie Jane? This is the question. We can be amazed by our experiences, and they can be quite spiritually significant for us too on our journey. So some people are frightened, and some people are just amazed and uplifted and feel so positive because of those experiences. And in the case of people who've lost loved ones, the grief can be allayed because they believe that they've communicated with some deceased relative. But where do these anomalous experiences actually come from? What's their origins? And how many rabbit holes are there for us to go down to actually explore these things? And once we get down there, as Barry likes to say, be careful about going down a rabbit hole, because you may only find bunnies, right? So you've got to be aware of that too. So there's lots of different things going on. There's, I think our experiences are that some of them could be projections from our own psyche. I think that's quite possible. I also think that there's some sort of cognitive manipulation going on by these intelligences, and I'm just going to put a C in there for other, because we don't really know. But I do believe that these other types of strange experiences originate from outside our ordinary reality, because we just don't see them all the time. And another place where I think it's highly likely they originate from is from dark matter in the universe. And this is the largest map that scientists have been able to put together of dark matter in the universe, in the known universe so far. And here's our little Milky Way galaxy all the way over there. So, and dark matter makes up about 80% of all matter in the universe. That's what our scientists say, okay? And I've read other things that say that we are really only seeing 4% of our reality. But it's not directly visible, and it's spotted instead through its interaction with other objects. The way that they can find it is it's picked up because it's a reflection off of other solid objects, okay? Ordinary matter carries only about 20% of energy of dark matter. And the question is, does dark matter harbour life? Well, I think it's quite possible. Are there such things as dark galaxies, dark stars, dark planets, dark atoms and dark life? And if so, does it have a diversity similar to our own? And is light matter, where we are, the most significant and therefore the most complex and interesting? Maybe not. Maybe not at all. And if the afterlife exists, could it be situated in the world of dark matter? And I would add to that, do extraterrestrials navigate in the world of dark matter too? Because they as the witnesses I've spoken to over the years, they report the UFOs appearing out of nowhere and then disappearing back into nowhere, like boom, like that. Now, a lot of people think that that's to do with cloaking, but maybe it's not, and maybe it's dimensional. Maybe they come into our dimension and then disappear. Maybe there's a thoroughfare between a few dimensions that they're navigating through. I mean, who saw Star Trek? Do you remember in the series of in one series with Voyager series, that's right, where there was an extraterrestrial race that actually existed in the subatomic matter, which would be this, I would expect, or some of this, and they would come out of that to attack the spaceship that Captain Janeway was in. So and then they had to, the crew of the Voyager had to figure out, they had to do a MacGyver to be able to figure out how to go into that subatomic situation so that they could go and deal with those bad aliens, okay?
There is a theory, David, about what dark matter is. You talk about different universes. Let's say that our universe is a sheet of paper. We live our entire life on this sheet of paper, but directly above us, there could be a parallel universe hovering right over us, perhaps inches, centimeters away, and objects in this parallel universe would be invisible. Light travels beneath the universe, so we never see this other galaxy. But gravity goes between universes, because gravity is nothing but the bending of space. So if the space between two sheets of paper is bent slightly, gravity then moves across. So think about it. This other galaxy in another universe would be invisible, yet it would have mass. That's exactly what dark matter is. Dark matter is massive, it has gravity, but it's invisible. It has no interactions with light or the electromagnetic force. So there is a theory that says that perhaps dark matter is nothing but matter, ordinary matter in another dimension hovering right above us. We should also point out, however, that there are other theories too. Dark matter is the cutting edge of science. Some people think that maybe it's a higher vibration of the string. All the atoms of our body represent the lowest octave of a tiny rubber band vibrating all over our body. And the rubber band can have a higher octave. That next octave could be dark matter. So that's yet another explanation for what dark matter might be. So the bottom line is this. There's a shelf full of Nobel Prizes waiting for you, waiting for anyone who can come up with a convincing and experimentally verified explanation of the origin of dark matter.
Okay, so now let's start off with electric voice phenomena, which is, as you all know, is where devices are used to record information beyond our sensory gating, put it that way. So that's why we get strange things showing up on fences, on cameras, on our phones, etc. Voices showing up that we can't ordinarily hear. And there's all types of things like ghost boxes or spirit boxes used to be able to capture them. So I think there's enough evidence for some sort of intelligence trying to communicate with this reality, that's for sure. Extra information, like David Oates, the Australian who sort of brought our attention to reverse speech, he's down in Adelaide. That was back in the 90s. He did experiments with recording his daughter, and she was pre-verbal, I think she was, and she was crying because he was going out, right, and so he was going to be away, and she was crying for her daddy. But when he played it backwards, in the crying was "Daddy, don't go." Okay, so she's pre-verbal, so she wasn't saying anything, but that was in the reverse cry. So that's very interesting too. Yeah. Aliens exist. There's no two ways about it. It's possible they're here right now and we simply can't see them. So says Helen Sharman, Britain's first person in space. Interesting. And I think that's true. there's it's really interesting. I've spoken to so many interesting people over the years in the UFO community, and people have had all types of experiences, and I probably wouldn't have thought that some years ago, but now I think I do, because there are so many strange things you can't explain that happen in close encounter reports that are strange, cryptic, out of the blue, and people talk about being touched by unseen forces as well. But in regard to extraterrestrials under this umbrella of the subject today, the UFO people here, but others of you who've read the information too, probably possibly think along the lines of some of the things that I do, that extraterrestrials are involved in human affairs in far many ways than we actually realise. And there's all sorts of theories, like they've been involved in our development, for example, our social development, our civilization's development, and I have done a presentation on that before. But I think it's more than that. They've been around for a long time. They exist in ways that we're aware of and ways that we don't. And this was something I came across the other day, Britain's first UFO sighting in 1742 by this gentleman who was walking home after being to a meeting, I think it was, from memory, and he saw this object in the sky. Of course, in 1742 there were no things like that in the sky. And this is his own sketch here, right? But basically he was watching it, he was doing all sorts of interesting things, he lost sight of it for a bit more here and there through the buildings, and then it just disappeared. And so these things have been around for a long time. They exist in ways we don't understand. We think we know something about UFOs, extraterrestrials. Like when I got involved in the UFO community, I thought that they were from other planets and they were interstellar travellers and blah, 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 and I'm sure some of them are. But I do have sort of come around over the years to think that they are interdimensional, they come from other dimensions, and some of them are here on our planet, but some of them come in and out of our ordinary reality. And I think at times they weave into, when we access those other realities, for example during near-death experiences, or our consciousness does, that they can interact with that as well. In fact, they may even populate that particular place, which we might call the afterlife. Some might refer to as that, but it's certainly some sort of unseen realm where our consciousness can go, but our physical body can't. We have things like this painting by Art de Gelder, was a Flemish painter. I think it's hanging in the Fitzwilliam Museum in London in the UK, painted around 1710. Why? Why did he paint that, do you think? Did he actually see something like that? This is over the baptism of Christ. What does that mean? What could we unpack from that, you know? And there's a whole host of historical painting artworks where UFOs have been painted into them, which is for another presentation, but because there's so many of them. Very good depictions of modern day UFO sightings, basically, in the shapes that people see. The question is, why depict it over the baptism of Christ? That's my question. And why of, like there's one famous one that some of you would have seen where it's the Virgin Mary, she's holding Jesus, and in the background they've painted the dog and the man looking up at the sky, and here's this UFO with sparks coming out of it, which is, art light emanations. And then we have, I always have to mention Fatima, because it was just such a phenomenal experience, and I think I say it in the next slide, I'm not sure, but it's the best documented all-time paranormal experience in the history of the world, really. It's so well documented, it's amazing. Where the children saw the Virgin Mary appeared for six times over, was it about 6 months or something like that? And on the last day, we know when the crowd was standing there waiting, when the children had said, you know, she's going to appear again, and then they're standing there and this silvery disc appears, and they talked about it being the miracle of the sun, but it wasn't the sun. And there'd been a huge downfall of rain, and then as this thing appeared, within seconds like that, everyone was dry. They'd all dried off. So here's something that's appeared from somewhere, for some reason, to a Catholic community, by the way. And a lot of these actually experiences where the Virgin Mary appears to people are in religious communities as well. 70,000 witnesses, right? And if you haven't read the book, I think, what is it called? Heavenly Lights. It's a great book by Fina Damada, who's now passed away, I think, and someone else, both Portuguese people, and where they go through and they look at all the original descriptions in Portuguese from the witnesses at that time, and they look at modern day encounter reports, and everything is parallel. We have Susie Hanson's book, our good friend Susie, The Dual Soul Connection, and yeah, and her story is very interesting because we have, when she was taken on board a craft, she had this experience where these little grey beings came into the room with a blue light that was hovering, and then it entered into her abdomen, and she was led to believe that they were inserting the soul of her as yet unborn son. Now, I've heard a few of those types of experiences in the UFO community over the years. Did it really happen? I don't know. Susie believes it does, and I believe Susie that what she saw, that's how she interpreted it, how she understood it. But did it really happen? And this is where there are these stories that come into play where it seems to be that what we refer to as aliens, let's remember, underline aliens, because we really don't know what they are all the time. We only know what witnesses tell us and how they interpret it. How they're quite deeply involved in the intricacies of human birth and human death. Okay? And there's this, it's like we can go into these other realities, and these non-human intelligences can come into this reality, and under certain conditions that's magnified, and we can go there, we can access it, and under certain conditions for them, I expect, they can access ours more readily too. And it may have to do with a whole lot of other things that we don't even understand yet. Then we have J.Z. Knight, who channels Ramtha, and Ramtha claims to be an ancient extraterrestrial. And she's had, she's when she's channeling Ramtha, she's undertaken samples of her DNA have been taken, of her DNA before she channels, and then her DNA while she channels. And the DNA is 2 separate lots of DNA, and that's been tested by 3 independent laboratories.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. You can go online and Google that. Yeah, and she's got all the results printed, etc. So whatever it is somehow overlaying or changing her DNA to match its DNA. I mean, that's just incredible. We can't do that with our science. So what is it that's communicating? And then we have Betty Andreasen. Love this story. It's the best, one of the best cases in the UFO community. Where she, in the Watchers, there's another book out now which I've got, haven't read it yet, latest one, where she was having alien abduction experiences, and she was taken into a spacecraft, and by these little greys. And in one of the rooms, she went in there, and the little greys couldn't go in there, but she was met by this white light that wrapped itself around her, enveloped her, and all she could feel was unconditional love from it, emanating from it. Now that doesn't mean that it was, it just means that she was led to feel that, right? So again, we have to rely on what witnesses say, their interpretation of their experiences. But the bottom line is, we can't be certain about any of it, and that's the point. And in the UFO literature, there's the story of Howard Menger, who wrote about the High Bridge incident, and in his own experience, he was taken on board a craft at one stage and taken to another planet, and there he met his dead brother. There's a lot more going on here than what we realise. That's what he said. Whether he did or not's another thing, of course. He wouldn't have been in physical form because he was dead. But and was it really his dead brother, or was it some sort of trickster energy that was presenting itself as that, or some sort of a universal intelligence that wanted to communicate, but that was the only way it could have really communicated in a way that Howard could have taken that information on board, right? I mean, think about the end of what's that movie with Jodie Foster, Contact. Anyone see that? How many of you saw that? Right, okay, in the end of it, she's quickly, it just, humanity, or I can't remember who it was now, but they were given the plans to build a spaceship. And she was elected to go on this spaceship for various means, for various reasons, and she did. And while she was on it, the people on, she never left the planet. While she was in it, I should say, and it was just a round sphere, that she had this experience where she was taken to this beautiful location on a beach, and her father appeared to her. And he said, we've been doing this for thousands of years. We do it like this for various reasons. I can't quite remember exactly what he said. But basically, and then she came out of the experience, and the people who were overseeing the project, she said, and that's right, they were recording. Of course, the recording didn't come out, it was all blank. She said, I hope you all got that on record, etc. And they said, no, the tape was blank, the recording was blank. And she said, I had this experience. Didn't you see it? No, we saw nothing. You never left the planet. Right? So she was taken somewhere, whether she was in this craft, whether she was in her physical body or in her non-physical body, taken to a scenario, and this comes up a lot in these close encounter reports, that people are put into scenarios and have all types of experiences. And I think there's quite a few reasons, but I think one of them is that the intelligence that can do that, it does it for a specific reason for that person, so that they can understand something or they can have that experience. Why? I don't know. I just don't know. People are having experiences where they are contacted by something from other realms outside our normal sensory gating, basically. Just to end off Betty's experience, she had many experiences where she and her husband were taken in out-of-body states onto spacecraft. Again, I mean, you know, there's been breadcrumbs for us left all along the way. And I was just saying to, I think it was Adam before, that, you know, the UFO community didn't want to get involved in all that paranormal junk for such a long time. It's probably only the last 10 years they've really sort of taken it on board. And unfortunately, that's kept the understanding of not just the UFO community, but when you have these types of experiences that are left out of it, and then we cross-pollinate other subjects, we're way behind in trying to understand what's really going on and trying to expand our understanding of this reality and other realities. I mean, we could have been 50 years ahead of where we are now if things had been different. and scientists had been digging into these things earlier and all that sort of stuff. But they never, I don't think, well, they're getting better, put it that way, but this is a depiction of them being taken out of their house in an out-of-body state. That's what we're seeing, Des. Okay? Onto a craft. Okay?
Frightening.
After some years, I've sort of come to around to the idea at the moment, it's not written in stone, of course, but these things that people see, there's two possibilities, because UFOs don't have to be seen, but they are. Okay? They're either being seen on the way to going somewhere in the physical reality, or individuals are being shown. They're being shown to individuals for some reason, and I think that's significant because we know that they can camouflage themselves, right? And I don't understand why some and why not others. Could be something to do with that sensory. You know, some people are hypersensitive, so they can tune into other things, and some people are not. I don't know. Could be part of that. Could be a whole host of reasons. I just don't know. But and these are also communications from other dimensions, at least in the beginning, I think, because when Colin Andrews came here for the first time in '91, we hosted him at one of our meetings, and you know, in the early days of crop circles, they were very simple circles. They first appeared like ours that we had here, which were what we call saucer-nests. Simple circles, and then over a period of time they started to have these other little circles around the larger circle, and they were known by the croppies as grape shots. And then in the following season they started to have a line that was connecting the smaller grape shots outside the larger circle. And then they just grew from there, and then there were two lines, and then there were other types of things. So over time they've evolved. And I think that, you know, a lot of them these days are, well, some of them, let me say some, otherwise. Some of them are certainly man-made, I think. And Colin Andrews himself has said, and like a lot of other crop circle researchers, they believe that about 80% of them are man-made. But then the question is, why do people feel compelled to go out and make them in the first place, even if they are man-made?